Yes, I was supposed to be dead 20 years ago. So the title of my little talk today is Outliving Myself. But I'm really here to talk about its Siamese twin, which is unreasonable resilience. In order to outlive something, now a lot of you here are not dealing with or may never have to outlive a diagnosis, but probably everyone here has had to outlive heartbreak, outlive divorce, outlive the death of a loved one. We all are outliving things that we thought we might not be able to outlive. And being unreasonable so that we can be resilient is a key element. Most of us don't want to be unreasonable. Our minds like the idea of reason. It's supposed to make sense. But if we can step out of our minds, I'm going to encourage all of you to be out of your minds. I think that's a great goal for all of us. Okay, let's all be out of our minds. And, well, you can listen a little bit with it if you want to. But being unreasonable is about not buying into what we're told, not buying into the perceived notion about what's supposed to happen to any of us, what people tell us is our fate, is our path, where they think we're going, where we're supposedly going. I'm fortunate. I come from a lineage of unreasonableness. My family is crazy. I'm very fortunate. I grew up with many people in my family system who were told they were going to die before I was born, and then they lived through their lives. They lived to be 75, 85, 95. And I saw this was what's possible if you don't listen, if you don't take it in when someone gives it to you. So as Tracy said, let me talk a little about my story. I tested positive in 1984 as part of a study before the HIV test was available to the general public. I believe that I was probably positive as of 1975. That would be my guess. I wasn't surprised when I tested positive, but it's sort of the difference between being engaged and being married. They're just a little more serious, the commitment you've just found out about. And so I decided, okay, how am I going to deal with this? Well, what I did is I dove into the support community. I became a buddy at GMHC, and I wanted to be around what was happening because I figured if I'm in the center of it, I'm going to hear the things I need to hear. During this period, I ended up becoming part of a lunatic fringe, the people who were saying that you don't necessarily have to die. I walked into a support group in 1986, and people were not talking about how to prepare for death. They were talking about how to live the rest of their lives. That sounded interesting to me. So it was a life-changing moment. So for some reason, I never actually believed that I was going to die of AIDS or HIV. That was unreasonable in 1984, believe me. What the doctors were saying, the medical community was, you have basically 2 years to live, and probably the last year or more of it won't be a lot of fun. And I thought, well, we'll see, won't we? So I walked into that room, and mostly it was men in that room, and some people were very ill. But they were talking about, how do I want to live the rest of my life, whether it's 4 months or 40 years? And I got interested. So I became an activist in the alternative treatment field. And the work we were doing then in the 80s, we were the lunatic fringe. Today, I'm doing some of the same work, and we're mainstream. So that's another issue, too, is whether you're willing to stay with what you believe in and follow your passion and not be deterred by what is perceived and how people hold you. A big example of my unreasonableness was in the late 80s. I was living in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and I was in this field. I decided to go back to graduate school. And I entered what would, for me, would be a 4-year program in order to get a degree that would lead to me being a licensed psychotherapist, which I am today. But that was unreasonable to start a 4-year program when you had only 2 years to live. So I had to do a part of what I would call unreasonable resilience, is to look at the most interesting thing I could do at that moment in my life was to go to school. I had to be enjoying what I was doing then, and then we'll see whether I got to the goal or not. There's a wonderful forward affirmation that a gentleman gave me once in a workshop. Totally committed, completely unattached. That's the art form. And when I'm in trouble, I know I'm either not committed or I'm attached. So this was an opportunity to be committed to the process of learning and developing my skills and growing as a human being and a professional, and not being attached to with the result of whether I got the degree or not. And 3.5 years into the program, my immune system collapsed. 10 or 20 years, perhaps, after I acquired HIV. And I almost died. I was very ill. And I came through that, and I managed to finish my degree. So I did get there. And I'm glad I did, because, as I said, I outlived myself. And there was something that happened. The AIDS paradigm shifted. The world shifted around me, and I was fortunate to be there. Just like being one of the first people being tested, in 1995, I won a lottery for early access to the first workable cocktail in treatment for HIV. And I went from being somebody who had virtually on paper no immune system to someone who is in very good health. I've been in nearly perfect health for 20 years now. So these 20 years are the outliving myself. And again, it's the willingness to keep going, the willingness to say, I can live through this. Again, fill in the blank what it is for you. When I was just out of the hospital after pneumonia, very weakened, there was a writing group. It was Write Action, W-R-I-T-E, Action. And it was for the AIDS community in Santa Fe, and they met in my living room. And we would get together, and we would be inspired by something, and we would write for 15 minutes, and then we'd share what we wrote. Well, that day I wrote a little story, and I titled it The Song of the Unlikely Survivor. And it was a vision of myself dying as an old man in great peace. And I read that piece that day. A couple of years later, there was a collection of our writings that was put out, and that piece was in it. 2 years after that, after the AIDS paradigm shift, after I'd won the lottery, after things had begun to change, a second volume was put out of our writings. I was no longer in Santa Fe, but I was included in it. And the editor, Joan Logie, wrote in the introduction that when I read that little story in our group in 1994, she was heartbroken, because she said, I saw a weakened man who looked like he was dying talking about living to be an old man, and I thought he was delusional. And now, only 2 or 3 years later, everything has changed, and he is healthy again, and the possibility of his living to be an old man is very real. So what was delusional became visionary. So I have been both delusional and visionary. And it's not about me changing, it's just about the fact that the perception of the world changes and grows. So again, stay with yourself, trust your own intuition, trust your own skills. One of the biggest things about unreasonable resilience is the belief in who we are and what we've already gotten through. I already know from listening to other people speak to you, asking you to raise your hands, everyone in this room has already gotten through many things. You have built up psychic muscles that are there. And the thing we often do is we forget who we are. When something comes up, we think, this is something I can't handle. Well, why couldn't we handle it? We've already handled something that's even bigger. Our security can never come from things not happening. Our only security comes from knowing that when things happen, we deal with them. That's being resilient. So I'm here to encourage you to look for win-win situations in your life. If you are facing your mortality, use that to really say, am I fully living? I like to think every year that perhaps this could be my last year on planet Earth, so I better be fully alive. And now I add in, I might live to 90, because I come from a family where people live to be very old. Our motto is, the good die young, we live forever. So I might be here for a long time, so I have to work with both of those. I bring both of those into the equation. I don't want to miss anything, and I also want to be fully alive for a while and see what happens. So I'm here to encourage you to take whatever has happened, whatever will happen, and use it as fuel. We can take it, we can transform it, we can dare to have the courage and be unreasonable, and we can outlive diagnosis, we can outlive illness, we can outlive divorce, we can outlive a spouse or a loved one, we can outlive a broken heart. Thank you.
Wow.
And thank you.
Wow. Thank you.